Hey Genderqueer Chat, it's Matt.
And Ricky.
And it's Thursday. And this week's topic is what is the high point and low point of your gender journey? And it's been really good watching everybody's videos this week. It's good to see the new people on board, Jay and Stacey. And they put up some really amazing videos, as well as Joe and Christina. Like, everyone's videos have been great this week, and very interesting perspectives on things, and yeah, it's been good.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So something Christina said actually in their video yesterday, Christina had actually answered this topic a couple of weeks ago, so was doing something different, but did mention in regards to how had assumed that this particular question was in reference to sort of post-identifying as genderqueer, so the gender journey being a period of time from the time that you identified as genderqueer onwards, rather than that could span your whole life. So that's something that I've been thinking about, because for me...
They said not just identify as genderqueer, but as like started thinking about gender, whether or not they knew the word genderqueer.
Yeah, sort of more actively thinking about gender. So that kind of resonated with me, because through trying to find an answer to this particular topic, that's the way I've kind of looked at it as well, assuming that it's from the point of really starting to think about your gender in an active way, rather than whatever came before it. So for me, definitely, I'm finding it difficult to find a high and a low point, but I think the high and the low point are actually the process of starting to look at my gender more constructively, unpacking that, identifying as genderqueer, and the whole process of the high and low. But you feel slightly different.
Yeah, I think I've always sort of thought about gender just because it's always been something that, you know, even as a kid, like, I didn't like being a girl, and I felt like this, sort of like Joe said, this just kind of sense of anger about it, and that lasted, I mean, like, I can remember being a little kid and saying I wish I was a boy, which was more about, you know, I wish I wasn't a girl. So it kind of has been my whole life. So even though I kind of actively started researching and, you know, looking into trans issues or gender issues as I was older, I was aware of gender stuff sort of throughout my whole life. So I interpreted the question as being a lifelong journey thing for me. So
I'm not really sure why I think of it differently. I mean, certainly gender had a part to play with my life before I started to think about myself as, you know, in more genderqueer terms. Certainly genderqueer caused a lot of issues, and was very apparent to me that there was something up, and I remember a lot of sadness and anger and frustration sort of revolving around gender, but I hadn't quite put my finger on that it was a gender issue, or even if I had put my finger on it as being a gender issue. I remember several times in my life where I got really, really upset and distraught, and sort of came to the conclusion of why wasn't I born a girl, and that this was somehow the root of all my problems. So definitely gender had a huge effect prior to me starting to actively think about it, but for me it's almost like that part of my life, as soon as I made the conscious decision to go, let's see what this is all about, or I had that realisation or whatever that made me, you know, set me forwards on my gender journey, it's almost like the rest of it was kind of another time, or sort of a different life almost. So for me, my high point was the moment that I decided to, for better or worse, think about gender and look at myself like that, and unpack what that meant for me, and really start to identify differently. And that's been a continued process from then till now, and all the highs and lows. But the high point was really coming out as genderqueer, even though I didn't use that term originally, but for the sake of this, you know, coming out as genderqueer, and seeing myself as genderqueer and accepting myself as genderqueer. And equally, that was also the low point, because by acknowledging that in myself and bringing up that big question mark, that was a very painful and isolating thing to do. So it basically sparked a couple of years of really intense inner turmoil and working through stuff, and yeah, it was a lonely, isolating time, and it forced me to question so much about myself and who I was, and I guess in a lot of ways question that whole 30 odd years like prior to me beginning my gender journey, and yeah, it was a different sort of thing. So equally, the best part was starting to look at that, identify that way, be more accepting and open about myself, giving myself the opportunity to actually explore that side of myself, and then, of course, all the stuff that brought up and got intertwined with it was also a very difficult and, yeah, kind of equal parts horrible and liberating. So that's, yeah, it's hard for me to pick out a really high point and a low point rather than just the entire journey. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, a low point when I think about it is probably more of when I was a teenager and I was at this stage thinking about gender where, as Joe said, they were just sort of this angry feminist, and I was a bit like that as well, and I kind of had this, thought or this belief that it was the rest of the world, it was their problem, not like a me thing. It was like everybody else is so fucked up and, oh, can you say that on YouTube? Sorry. So messed up and just like, everybody has this all wrong. That's not what it is. Gender is not what society tells us it is. And I do think that still to a certain extent, but I realize that, not identifying as female doesn't mean that all of, it doesn't mean that, nobody should identify as male or female, because there are people that just intrinsically feel male or female, and that's, just as valid as my not feeling it. So I think sort of one of the most difficult times for me was when I was confused about just what it meant really to be a female-bodied person who didn't fit in with anything. And, I felt like I didn't have a gender, but I didn't know how to really articulate that and how to think about that, and that, I didn't know that was actually an option.
Or
so,
okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I think for me, I would have thought it was okay. I just it was never presented to me as an option, and it was never, I was always treated like a girl, and there's something in being treated like a girl, and especially when I was a teenager and I was really tall and skinny and long blonde hair and everything, couldn't walk down the street without, getting catcalls and just stuff like that. It was infuriating. All day, every day, I was infuriated. And so I think that was the hardest part for me, just because it was so constant and I was so angry and I lived with that anger all the time. And that was really difficult. The best thing for me was probably, or is, just, after sort of a few years of identifying as genderqueer and just being an adult and being in a different kind of society, or sort of surrounding myself with people that are not, gender-oriented or don't worry about gender, kind of gives me permission to just live and be me, and I don't always have to think about it, and it always throws me off when somebody calls me she, or when somebody, assumes something based on my female body, and it kind of throws me off because that's just how much it doesn't play a role in my day-to-day life, and I'm not in a position in my life where I have to, interact all that much with the outside world. So it's kind of in terms of you know, that may not be a good thing, like, in general, but in terms of my gender, like, being comfortable in my own gender, it's good because I just don't have to live with gender all that much. So, it's good.
Yeah. Something a few of the others said as well, it was in regards to genderqueer chat and finding this kind of online community as being a high point, and that definitely is a high point for me. And in fact, what I said before about sort of, you know, starting to look at gender as being both the positive and the negative, the high and low point, I think if I didn't have genderqueer chat, if I didn't find genderqueer chat so bless you, so early on, maybe it would have been more of a low point. Maybe the hard stuff would have been harder, and the confusing stuff would have been confusinger, and the bad stuff would, yeah, you get the point. But, you know, finding that sort of community and other people who identify in that way, and of course finding genderqueer chat gave me permission and sort of made it okay in my head to use that term genderqueer as well, because before that, the actual term itself I had some issues with. But certainly finding genderqueer chat so early on in the gender journey, and listening to the people and hearing what they had to say and realising there was more people out there who felt similar, who questioned this stuff. It gave permission to, you know, to look at this stuff like gender and the binary and all that stuff and question it, and made me realise it's okay to question that. And then, of course, you know, being on the channel and being more active within that community has been awesome, and meeting all the fantastic people that we have met, and this one as well has been. Yeah. That's a really high point, knowing that you're not alone, and knowing that there's other people out there just like you, or kind of like you, or more like you, and that without that maybe it would have been a much more lonely, isolating, and kind of shit place.
I agree with that too, just meeting all the people, like meeting Matt and everybody else through genderqueer chat, and just sort of having this sense of community, which, you know, is mostly virtual, but at the same time, you know, we're all real people who are interacting, and, you know, I feel this connection to everyone on the channel, and that's been really, really great for me.
Yeah. So yeah, what are your high and low points? See you next week. Crap, I missed it. Where is it?